We've got breaking news out of the NBA where two-time MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo and his agent are meeting with the Bucks front office to discuss his future in Milwaukee. That is according to multiple reports. The Greek Freak is in his first season of a 3-year, $186 million extension, but could be on his way out of Milwaukee via a trade. Giannis, of course, we remember, led the Bucks to their first NBA championship in 5 decades back in 2021 and has spent his entire 13-year career in Milwaukee. And for more on this, let's welcome in our NBA analysts, Sam Quinn and Avery Johnson. So, Sam, I'll come to you first here. How did we get to this point with Giannis? It feels like this has been a conversation ongoing. Is he in? Is he out? We're looking at interviews that he's done with YouTubers and dissecting every little thing that he's said. Do you think Giannis and the Bucks can make amends, or do you think we're actually going to see a split here?
I think we're headed towards a split. If you're the Bucks, what you're hoping for is you can just hold out another couple of weeks. You get to around Christmas, the schedule starts to soften up really significantly. You have 2 Hornets games, you have a Kings game, you have another Wizards game, but then they just lost to the Wizards, so maybe this team really is unsalvageable. This is what happens when you take a high-risk approach to roster building year after year after year. You trade all your picks for Drew Holiday. That one works out. You trade all of your picks a couple years later for Damian Lillard. Not so much there. The Miles Turner acquisition has been a little hit or miss thus far. Right now, they're a team with very little depth. They're a team without draft capital to build moving forward. They've got $20 million in dead money on their books every year for the foreseeable future because they don't have Damian Lillard anymore. I think they just gambled and gambled and gambled with this roster. They kept kicking the can down the road, and now finally those chickens are coming home to roost. This is a 9-13 team. Whenever Giannis is either out for a game or on the bench, they completely fall apart. There's not much defense here to speak of. If Giannis wants to win a second championship, I think he's just starting to come to terms with the fact that it's not going to happen in Milwaukee. Even in a weak East, even, on a team that he's won with before, if getting that second ring is what ultimately matters, he's going to have to find a new team.
Completely agree with Sam on all factors. And let me just add this. The Milwaukee Bucks, remember, they fired Adrian Griffin last year. They were 30-13. Okay? They bring in my old teammate, Doc Rivers. Damian Lillard doesn't play up to his standard. Obviously, he gets injured. This team is really ready to crash and burn. They're 6 games away from being the last team at the bottom of the Eastern Conference with the Washington Wizards. Giannis has sensed this. He knows that this team is going nowhere fast, and he wants out. I can give him a couple of ideas if he just called me on some potential landing spots. But again, this team or any team, you got to have a point guard. You got to have a superstar, and you got to have a point guard. And he won a championship with Drew Holiday. Didn't win a championship with Damian Lillard because Damian Lillard is just basically a one-way player. He's not a two-way player like a Drew Holiday. So he needs to get somewhere where you have an outstanding point guard that can help assist Giannis in potentially winning another championship.
Coach, I'm going to ask you about some of the fits, but before we do that, I want to throw out a team that was out there. Rumors, there was a lot of chatter about Giannis and the Knicks over the summer. What do you make of that potential pairing with Giannis in New York?
One of the things, as fans got to understand when we have all of these wild theories about potential trades, what is Milwaukee going to get back in a trade for Giannis? Is it going to be Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns? Well, if that happens, Giannis doesn't make them a championship team. Is it, a couple of bench guys? You got to make the salaries come, close. But if they lose Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns, they're not a championship team. So you got to always remember what's going to come back in the trade. What can the Knicks retain so the core, especially of their current existing starting lineup, and then insert Giannis into that mix, and then they become a championship team.
Yeah, New York is a really tricky trade destination. Typically speaking, when it's what a star wants, there are ways they can make it happen. Giannis can be a free agent in 2027 if he tells the rest of the league, hey, I'm not re-signing with you. I'm going to go leave maybe for the Lakers, maybe for the Nets, whoever. You better not trade for me. Then the Knicks have a chance. But this is a team that has very little draft capital to trade with. They have a fake Washington first rounder that's really going to be a couple seconds. They've traded most of their own picks for Mikal Bridges. And then on top of that, Bridges isn't trade eligible until February because of the extension that he signed. So the Knicks would need this process to really drag out. They'd need Giannis to really, force the issue. Tell the Bucks, I'm not re-signing anywhere else. Send the message to the rest of the league. I'm not re-signing with you. I only want to be a Knick. Then maybe they could make this work. It would be tough. It would take some time. It would probably be ugly, and it might mess with his relationship with the city of Milwaukee. But it is potentially feasible. It's just not the easy path, and it's not the one the Bucks would want. Because Coach is right. Like, what are you winning if you're getting Karl-Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges back in that trade? You don't have any of your own picks as the Bucks. It'd be pretty bleak if that's the trade they ended up making.
And then you'd have to probably get a third or fourth team involved. All right. But just to try to do this trade straight up with the Knicks at this point in the season is very unrealistic.
Yeah, it's always interesting because the fan base always thinks like, what are we going to get? What are we going to get? Not what we're going to give to get a superstar like Giannis. So let's talk landing spots. Sam, what are some teams that could make sense? I know we said the Knicks is possible. It's kind of far out there, but some teams that would make more sense for Giannis should he be traded from Milwaukee.
Yeah, I think there are a couple teams to watch, and most of them, unsurprisingly, are in the West because guess what? That's where the contenders are. Start with the Lakers. I think they were out of the mix in the past because they just didn't have enough to trade. Now that Austin Reeves is like growing into a real all-star, he could maybe be the centerpiece of a trade like this. The Lakers only have one first-round pick to trade. That's going to be an impediment. They'd have to throw in several role players just to make the money work. LeBron has a no-trade clause, so he's not going to be in this deal. LeBron is not going to Milwaukee in his 40s. Sorry, Bucks fans. So I think the tricky part here is Austin Reeves is an unrestricted free agent after the season. I don't know how eager he would be to re-sign with the Bucks. There's so much cap space out there that I think he would probably want to explore the market. So that's tough. But if the Bucks could convince him to re-sign, maybe there's something there. You go down to Atlanta. Atlanta has some control over Milwaukee's future first-round picks in the next couple of years. That's going to be very valuable if the Bucks want to tank. They have that New Orleans pick this year, which right now would be the number one pick. I'm sure the Bucks would love to get the number one overall pick as a way to rebuild around, their next core. The Hawks could trade Trae Young in that deal. Trae Young has been out for most of the year. The Hawks have been very, very good without him. This might be a clean way for them to cut bait, not have to deal with re-signing him, saying, oh, we would have kept him, but, we could get Giannis. Might as well go for it. If they're willing to take a risk here and maybe trade for Giannis without assurances that he'll re-sign, that I think is a potentially pretty interesting high upside destination. Then there are the teams we talked about all summer. Houston, San Antonio, these asset-rich teams in the West have a lot of picks, have a lot of young players who, if they want to get in on this, those are the teams that the Bucks would presumably prefer to trade with. That's where you're going to get the best package. The problem? They've been playing so well that I don't know that they'd want to trade for Giannis right now. If you're the Rockets and you've only lost 5 games all season, why are you breaking up your team? You think you can win a championship with what you have? San Antonio, 14-6. Victor Wembanyama missed a bunch of games. They're probably looking at this and saying, do we really want to fast track that much? We're happy with what we have. We have a ton of young talent. We think we have a long runway ahead of us. Do we really want to hit the fast forward button? That's going to be the question here. If either the Rockets or the Spurs get into this, they're the favorites because they have the most to trade. If they don't, that's when you start talking about the Lakers. That's when you start talking about the Hawks. You start looking for these sleeper destinations because, what Giannis wants is what's ultimately going to matter. There aren't that many teams that have the assets to trade for him and would give him a chance to win. It's a short list, and if it's not the Spurs or the Rockets, it gets harder and harder to find pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. But one other team, Detroit Pistons. Right now you're number one in the Eastern Conference. Cade Cunningham, who played on our AAU team. I've been knowing Cade since he was in sixth grade. This team is another team that's right there on the verge. Independent of what their record, they're not good enough to win a championship. But if you can add Giannis to the mix and pair him with that 1-2 punch with Cade Cunningham, I think their ceiling becomes extremely high. As it relates to the Spurs, Sam mentioned the Spurs. Would the Spurs be willing to part with, a Dylan Harper, a Stephon Castle, and a bunch of other guys and picks to make this work? That's the billion-dollar question, because the Spurs just got approved to build their own new little playpen in San Antonio, I believe in 2030 or 2031. So are they going to try to fast track as they start moving into their new arena in 3 or 4 or 5 years? So those are a couple of teams that we should keep our eyes on.
All right, the Giannis conversation continues. Avery, Sam, we certainly appreciate it. Joining us for that breaking news, if you're just tuning in, Giannis and his agent are meeting with the Bucks front office to discuss his future in Milwaukee. That is what reports are saying. That's the latest on Giannis. Getting a look at the shortest odds to win the NBA Finals. The Knicks, that was thrown out there as a possible destination for Giannis. 15-1. Coach Avery Johnson likes the Pistons as a fit. They are 25-1 alongside the Magic and the Warriors, and the Thunder. They are the odds-on favorite here, plus 125 to repeat.